Okay. Okay, thank you. I would like to thank the organizer for including the paper in the program and for having a session dedicated to apps. And that means that there is more of a consensus that the apps are not just cute, but actually have an impact on investor and consumer behavior. So I would like to start by noting that the way people access their personal financial information, things like their account balance or recent transactions, changed dramatically over the past few decades. In the 90s, you had to wait for a physical mail with your statement, or you could call the bank, but most of the time you got outdated information. In the 2000s, you were able to use your personal computer as long as you had fast enough internet connection and you are at home. It's only about 10 years, it's the early 2010s, that you could use your mobile phone to access your personal financial information, and you can pretty much do it anytime and anywhere because the cellular network was good enough for that. It's not enough that it's available, but people are actually using it. In the US, for example, approximately 87% of the adult population have a mobile phone, a smartphone, and out of the people with phone and a bank account, 50%, 53% of them are using their mobile banking app. So that's a lower bound because there are more people that use other finance apps not provided by their bank. So given this dramatic change in technology and access to information and the big adoption rate, we ask in this paper the question, does having mobile access to your personal financial information makes a difference? Does it influence individuals' financial behavior? And what we will do is we will look at the spending mostly and login behavior of individuals that were already accessing that information on a personal computer and install the mobile app in addition. And now they're using both, and we will see what happens to their spending and attention that they give to their finances. So why should mobile access to financial information make any difference at all? What does our theory predict? So I will just list the main theories. First of all, we have the limited attention, accessing, absorbing information, processing it is costly. And on a very basic level, people, because it's costly, choose not to update their information all the time. And between updates, they are a bit uninformed and they make suboptimal decisions. Optimal, incorporating the costs of accessing the information. But if they had more information, they could have made more informed decisions. So according to this theory, the mobile access reduces the cost of getting the information, and therefore the optimal level of attention to personal finances should increase, and therefore these consumers are supposed to make better spending decisions. It doesn't give a strict prediction of more or less, just better, more informed. And a practical example for that would be a survey that was run by the Fed showing that 62% of mobile banking apps reported using this app in the store to check their account balances, and 50% of these individuals reported not making a purchase because of what they just learned. So this is an example of how information limited attention might be mitigated by this mobile access. The second related theory is costly self-control. People with inconsistent preferences every now and then give in to the desire to spend something that they didn't want to, that doesn't fit their long-term goals. So according to this theory, the mobile access to personal information might actually improve the consumer's ability to apply self-control. There is a lot of research about that, showing how reducing the cognitive effort when trying to resist a temptation is helpful in mitigating this action. So if you see your financial account, maybe you decide not to make the purchase, or by increasing the salience of information, you see that maybe you don't have enough money in your bank account and you start to feel guilt and regret in case you will make the purchase and you decide to let it go. Okay, so according to this theory, we will expect to see a decline in spending, and especially in spending categories that are more spontaneous and tempting, not things like mortgages or utilities. Okay, and the last one would be information-dependent utility. According to this class of models, the information is not just means to an end, but it actually directly enters the utility function of the individuals, and it has an impact on their well-being. So getting extra exposure to personal financial information will have a differential effect. High-income individuals might feel better viewing their personal finances, but low-income individuals or people that feel like they overspend might get disutility from actually viewing more of their account. So introduction of this mobile access should lead to a differential effect between high-income and low-income individuals, where low-income individuals pay less attention to their finances to avoid this disutility of looking at their overdraft and might consider to spend less. So these are the main theories that we're going to test here. And the paper is also related to a large literature. I think that it's very familiar to everyone here about the technology impact on financial behavior. We have several studies showing the impact of the trading platform on investor behavior. In the early 2000s, people were switching from landline to trading through a landline to a PC. And recently we have the paper by Alessandro here with us showing what happens when people switch to a mobile device. They use the same instrument that I will describe shortly, the introduction of mobile apps. And we see across the board that introduction of e-commerce apps like eBay's SMS messages and mobile payments all influence investor behavior, consumer behavior, and even corporate finance, the growth rate of firms and firm creation. One study that I would like to mention that is also very close to ours, Carlin and co-authors showing using the same instrument, introduction of mobile apps in Iceland, that it influenced the fees that consumers pay after adopting this app. I would like to point out, and this is related to the previous paper that we've seen, the paper is also hopefully starts a discussion about saving behavior. Most of this literature is focused on the saving rate measured as the contribution to retirement accounts or any other account, which when you think about it by itself is just moving money from one account to another. Saving rate, it might be saving or not, but at the end of the day, saving is income minus spending, and apps might have the potential to reduce spending and therefore increase the saving. The problem with contribution to retirement account alone is that we know now that there is a lot of leakage from these accounts back to the spending of consumers after several years. Okay, so let me describe the data. It's provided by a company that offers a free personal financial management app. It's free to the general public. It has account aggregation technology. I think that we all know what it is, but just in case, you can link all your accounts, asset accounts, liabilities accounts into one place. It aggregates all the information into one picture. Whether you log in or not, it's always up to date. Today, well, there is a lot of research already published using this app, so these data sets. And now it's offered by many financial services. It's no longer small Silicon Valley startups, but also the big commercial banks, B of A, Morgan Stanley, are offering it to their clients as a free service because they are interested in learning about their clients more. Important for this app, the app that we use does not offer, you cannot do anything else except for viewing your accounts. You cannot make payments, you cannot rebalance your portfolio, you cannot save in that app, and that's a good thing. We will focus on the access to information, and the mobile app is identical to the PC app. They show the same information, it's structured differently, but it has the same features. Our data includes transactions and login activity, which we use as a proxy for attention. Now, there is a big concern about endogeneity, right? A person might decide that they need to do something to change their financial behavior. And one of those methods that they will try to do that is by installing the mobile app. Okay, so the decline that we see might be a result of a separate endogenous decision. So first of all, our results are conditional on adoption of the app, meaning that we only study the impact of the app, the mobile app, on people that are willing to have it. We do not know what the effect is on people that are not willing to have it or were forced to install it, and we're not sure that we care. But what we do have is an instrument about the timing of the installation. We use the gradual release of 3 mobile apps, iPhone, iPad, and Android, in different points in time, separated by at least 2 months, and we use it as our instrument. What we can see here is that there is a big mass of users just after the release of each of those apps installing the app, and we do not see this kind of cluster anywhere else. Okay, so it's unlikely that everyone made a decision to install the app on that exact same week, and this week happened to be the release of the app, and it happened 3 times at 3 different calendar dates. So we attribute this install to the release of the app, which is exogenous to the users. Let me be clear, the users still decided to install it, but implicitly we assume that they would have been willing to install it a week before or a week after if the app was released then. So we are comparing before installing when they wanted it to after installing when they still wanted it. So we are netting out the effect of the desire. Okay, so our sample include users that have been using the app for a while, so we can see enough history, at least 3 months. They logged in at least once in those 3 months. We want to make sure that we have actually active users and not someone that was just looking at the app. Linked one bank account, one credit card account, and we see a sufficient amount of income and spending. Okay, these apps usually have millions of inactive users, and we split the sample into 2. Our main sample of interest is sample X for exogenous. These are users that installed the app in the first 14 days after it was released. Okay, this is allows us to have a causal relationship, and the other one are more of a robustness check. It's much bigger sample, and we call it sample N. Okay, it's just as a robustness and a statistical power. Our main dependent variable is the discretionary spending. These are spending on categories that are relatively easier to adjust, things like restaurants, electronics, not necessities like utilities and mortgages. Okay, we try to stick with the GIC definition of consumer and discretionary sector. That would be our main variable of interest. Here is our sample X and N. We have around 730 users in the sample X, and the other one has nearly 7,000. We can see that the median logins is about 4 times per month. They are relatively wealthy with a median income around 11,000, spending about 2,000 below that. A huge chunk of the spending, about a third, is from this discretionary spending, and we have another large item, which is the cash withdrawal. So what we will do is we'll just regress it on a post variable before and after to quantify the overall effect of installing the app, and we will also look at the dynamics of the response using event time indicators. So let's see the impact on login behavior. What we see here in the blue line, these are the overall number of logins, and the timeline is the app installation date. In this case, the release of these 3 apps. And what we can see that before the release, users were logging in approximately 4 times per month. Immediately on the release, there is an immediate increase to more than 16. That's quadruple the number of logins per month, and it sustains for the next 12 observed months. So it's immediate and persistent. And what's interesting to see here is that there is no change in the PC logins. meaning that the mobile phone do not substitute the PC logins. There seems to be a demand for access that is not provided, that is not satisfied by the PC alone. We also look at the time of the day before and after. These are densities that are scaled to 1. Here we see that there is a, before the release, just the PCs, there is a peak around before work time on weekdays around 8 p.m. and it gradually declines during the day. Weekends is much less active. And we see that this pattern does not change after the release of the mobile apps. What's interesting to see is that there is a new peak, the red line on weekdays, around 4 to 6 p.m., which is also retail peak time. That is consistent with the story that people might be looking at their phones in the store. Okay, the discretionary spending are dropping significantly. These are the dynamics, and this is the overall effect, around 11% for sample X, around 8% for sample N. Okay, and the decline is immediately after the installation again, and it's immediate and persistent. And we look at specific spending categories. These are the most prevalent. The decline in the discretionary spending is coming from these items: restaurant, clothing, entertainment, and travel. These are things that are relatively easy to adjust. You can just eat at home or go to a less fancy restaurant or maybe skip the vacation. So this is what we would expect to find with respect to costly self-control. And we see here another decline in cash withdrawals. Cash is not part of the discretionary spending. So this is either a additional cut in current spending or maybe future spending. This is consistent with consumers placing higher sentimental values for cash transactions. We see that most of the effect, we add another interaction term with income. This is dummy for 1 above the median and 0 below median of the income level in our sample, and the same thing for spending over income. And what we see here is that with respect to income, the effect is coming from the lower income users. These are not low income, these are lower income. This sample is relatively wealthy. And also the attention is lower among those people that spend a lot over their income, and this result is not as significant. So people that are less comfortable with their finances do seem to pay less attention, potentially because of the disutility, the pain that it causes them to view their accounts, and actually cut their spending more. We do a bunch of robustness check to see that there is no such change in utilities, telephone, or rent. The overall impact, the impact on overall spending is there, but it's not as. It's mostly because discretionary spending is a big chunk of overall spending, and it's not as significant. Okay, but we're glad to see that they just don't spend all the money on somewhere else. And these were our main results. So you might be worried about this sample X, that they actually made a decision to cut their spending before the app was released. And therefore, what we see is happen to be correlated with the release of the app, but it's actually related to a previous decision that they made to cut their finances. So we do a bunch of robustness checks to make sure that this is not the case. There is no pre-trend. We have fixed effects that may change estimator, and we can rule that explanation out. Let me okay. So you might be worried that the app is this result is specific for this app. So I would like to say that all these account aggregation apps are generally show the same information. There are a few of them that are exotic, but they pretty much show the same thing. There are transactions by category, net worth, etc. But more importantly, users that use the banking apps actually use it mostly for viewing. So 94% of mobile app users reported viewing it for information, but only 28% of them used it for something else, like making a payment. Okay, with the interest of time, I will skip. So what do we learn from this study and how does it affect the theory? So it is consistent with rational inattention. People are logging more from the mobile device without dropping their use of their PCs, and they do it at times that are consistent with a retail peak time. There seemed to be a demand for information that was not satisfied by PCs alone. But we believe that this improved in information cost is not that significant because a person can view his finances in the morning and the finances do not change on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis, and they were already logging in 4 times per month. We believe that this is more a behavioral role for information that we detect, either through self-control, meaning that the salience of information and not the content, the actual account balance, that make a difference in the purchasing decisions of the consumers. And the differential effect between low and high income individuals is also consistent with a story of a sentimental role of the information rather than actual, okay, that was my timer. Rather than actual traditional information role. And so to conclude, there is a lot we do not know. We know that the mobile apps work, but we need to continue to explore what is the exact mechanism. We study relatively wealthy individuals. This is an important population to understand. They are responsible for a huge portion of the consumption, at least in the US. They are probably representative of the marginal retail investor, but they are definitely not representative of the US consumer. Since I'm out of time, let me just conclude with that. We learned this lesson that the platform that people interact with their finances matters approximately once a decade when we switch from landline to PCs and now to smartphones. And this is important thing to remember when we go to the next platform, whatever it will be. And also when we think about comparing individuals across different income levels or different countries, there are many places, and today the norm is to only have a mobile phone or a mobile app, and many people in many countries do not even own a PC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. This was a really interesting presentation. So now we have Ziwei Zhao as a discussant. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So first, thank you so much for inviting me to discuss this paper. I find it really fun to read. The results are really interesting and convincing. So let me get started by putting this paper into the literature a little bit. So I think this paper fits into this big strand of discussion regarding whether fintech makes our investors more soggy or dumber. And much of the paper are authored by the participants in this session. There's this, on one hand, their papers proving that robo-advising actually make investors a little bit more careful about their investment, reduce some of their behavioral biases, and also financial knowledge, like through the fintech, can help people to or force them to pay more attention to negative news and make moves on that. On the other hand, studies have found that smartphones might increase investors' purchasing of riskier or lottery-type assets and encourage some sort of audience effect of chasing past returns. Also, I do believe that this paper, by looking at, by making it possible for people to check their financial situations on an app, like voluntarily, somehow is related to these papers that talk about how investors actually value human interactions in the environment of fintech, and people are more prone to fintech products when they actually feel that they're in control. And in this case, it's through this account aggregation app. So this paper also fits into the literature of utilizing the account aggregation technology to study household consumption behaviors, like Baker in 2008, and investment behaviors. So I think Yaron has done a really terrific job giving our the results of this paper. So I will focus more on the theoretical backgrounds behind each result. So the first part of the major result is that consumers, for those consumers who already installed this app on a PC, now after they adopt the mobile version of this app, first they increase their monthly logins through this app. So the theoretical model or the theoretical story backing the result is that information is costly for consumers. So they don't check their financial situations all the time. Alternatively, once the mobile app is introduced, they lower the information cost for consumers. Hence, the new optimal level of attention is reached. And this new optimal level of attention is realized by logging in more oftenly. So that is like the theoretical background that's backing this first part of the result. And the second part is that after the introduction of this mobile app, consumers, they decrease their monthly discretionary spendings. And this result is especially pronounced for those consumers who have lower income in the sample or higher spending to income ratio in the sample. And this part of result is based on two strands of models. The first part, the decrease in spendings, is backed by the costly self-control models and reference-dependent utility models. So the models argue that people have this ostrich effect. They avoid negative information. And one remedy or one part could influence people to pay more attention to their account or decrease their spending is by improving the access of information or by improving the salience of the information. And hence, like in this paper, the mobile apps increase the salience of this information, and then the consumers decrease or discourage, this discourages the consumers to spend in their discretionary area. And the second part, like this decrease in discretionary spending effect is more pronounced part, is backed by the reference-dependent utility models sample. So the idea or the story here is that the utility function is concave. Hence, low-income households should be more affected by this ostrich effect. So hence, the mobile apps should help them more, should decrease their discretionary spendings more. And this is indeed what the authors found in this paper. So that's a quick zoom back regarding what they found. So let me give a general picture or assessment of what I think about this paper. First, I think the motivation is very strong. It is definitely very important for us to understand how mobile apps in general affect the household's behaviors. Because like I think Yaron used the same figure a few years before. So you can see the trend, like the mobile apps are increasing like their in terms of their user numbers. So these days, around 90% of the US adult population has mobile phone, and of those 90%, 33% of them use mobile phones to access their mobile banking. And second, I do believe that through the gradual release of the apps, like with the time difference in terms of the release of the apps, the authors have a very clear and smart identification strategy. So, and also they have quite strong results in terms of the login, and especially in the area of the mobile apps decreases the discretionary spendings. So as the consumers adopt the mobile version of the financial aggregation app. So like my comments are going to be regarding the two parts of the results. The first comments are regarding the login numbers, and the second is regarding the discretionary spending result. So the first thing is that this paper argues that what the mobile apps bring to the table is that they increase our access to information, or they increase the salience of the information. However, there's also another strand of the literature that focuses on mobile apps and push for their push-up notification functions. So I know the authors argue that the PC and the mobile app offer exactly the same content. And I also understand that due to the confidentiality rules made, like with the data providers, the authors cannot share actually the layout of the mobile app by sharing the picture of the app or the graph of the PC. But I think what will be helpful or clearer is to provide a detailed table of the common elements that's shared between the PC version and the mobile app version. That way, people will have a better understanding of what's offered here, what's offered there. So like maybe, for example, for me, I have the push-up notification on my phone and also an email alert through the email at the same time. So maybe you can argue the email alerts like through the PC end serves the same purpose as push-up through some other test here. Or also like I noticed, I checked on my bank account, like in terms of the PCN and the mobile app, I find that the charts offered can be somehow different, especially if I compare to the peers, or like sometimes my phone only show the chart, not the numbers. Maybe a comparison of that will be more straightforward and help you to get out of the trouble of like whether this is a push-up notification, whether it's a different format of apps here and there. So that's that. The second part is regarding using the rational inattention model to explain this increase in monthly logins. So the story here is that consumers, they trade off between the cost of obtaining information and the benefit of getting the information. So a mobile app decrease the cost of obtaining information. So hence, like the authors use logins from the apps and PCs and logins from PC itself to show that it is indeed like the consumers, they increase their login numbers. But how about the logins from the mobile apps? So I know there's no post and ex ante in this part because you don't have a login number before the mobile app is launched. But how about showing that the login, the increase in terms of the login times is stable for quite some time? Because your story is that the new optimal level of attention is reached through this decrease in information cost. So hence the login numbers should reach a new optimal level and the times should be consistent. Should be stable over time. So another possible test that can potentially help a little bit with the endogeneity concern is like for those small sample of users who first install iPhone app, and then after several months, when the iPad version is launched, maybe they install the iPad launch because install the iPad app. Because the major endogeneity concern here is that people might voluntarily choose to install this mobile app in an attempt to better manage their financial situations. And that's the part that's a little bit messy, like, and also with the push-up notification as well, like once they install the mobile app, a new like area of push-up notification is introduced. But with the possible test of like, if you compare after like for those consumers who already have the iPhone app, after they have the iPad version, maybe their logins still increase in this sense. This way it's clearer that it's still from like because of the mobile app, while controlling for all the differences between PCNs and push-up and all those people who voluntarily self-select themselves into this sample. So another like maybe minor point is that I do find that you use a T-3, which is 3 months before the launch of the app, as a baseline result, but in T-2 and T-1, there's this significant negative result here. So maybe there are some noises before the launch of the app here and there that decreases the logins. So maybe grouping the 3 months together would help a little bit with addressing the noises. So the third one is regarding the decrease in discretionary spending results. So I understand that this is like a group of relatively wealthy household, but I still think it's very important for us to understand this group. It's just I want to make sure we are on the same page when we are talking about the word low income here, because I checked the sample is majorly in 2011, and in 2011 the median household yearly income is around $50,000 US, while the main sample here median income is around $154,000. It is, if you check with the census data, it is close to the highest quintile of incomes, or even the 5% top incomes of top percent of wealthy households in the US. So I think it still makes sense for us to understand those incomes, those households, even though their incomes are relatively higher. But when we are talking about low incomes, or when we are using the models to explain the story here, we are trying to use the concavity of the utility function. So that's the part where the low income group is relevant, or the definition of low income group can become kind of tricky here. So are those low income households really low income? Do they really carry that function there? So maybe like this decrease, this more pronounced decrease in discretionary spending result comes from the peer comparison effect. Maybe there's some other possibility or heterogeneous factors that can help explain this effects. I'm simply saying there are possibly other explanations for this effect right here. So some other comments, like the first one is, I think it's also mentioned in the paper, but so I guess I'm looking forward to the results here. Maybe it makes some sense to give us a number regarding what kind of welfare effect this mobile app helps to save the discretionary spending of households for different income groups, for different age groups. And another aspect which I look very much forward to reading is that maybe you can exploit some of the heterogeneity in consumers in terms of their age, their retirement status, and their ethnicity backgrounds. Those are all possible factors that can help make your story stricter or clearer. So in sum, I think this is a paper with a very ideal and clever setting to identify a really important question that we know very little about at this moment. And the paper is really well written, very smooth writing, clear evidence. I enjoy reading it a lot. I would definitely recommend other people to read it as well. My suggestion is to consider more discussions to really link this whole story together to help back up the theoretical story here, exclude other mechanisms, maybe exploit the heterogeneity in consumers a little bit. So that's it. That's all my comments.
Thank you so much, Ziwei, for this interesting discussion and for all the suggestions. Yaron, would you like to respond to Ziwei? But also Alessandro had a question in the chat, so please address that as well.
Okay, yes, thank you so much for this discussion. That's very helpful. Thank you. We will talk about it more later. So let me just touch the main point. So we really do not know what is it about the mobile app that caused this response. I do feel like partially related to a notification. By the way, at that time, there were no fancy push notifications like we have today with text or even graph. At that time, at least of sample X, the initial one, there was only badge app icon. You had an icon of the app and a number on it saying that there is a notification if you go inside. But that also triggers some sort of attention. And I think that it does make a difference. I think that even without notification, just viewing the icon of that app on your phone every time you open it also grabs your attention, and this might be the effect. We are saying that it matters, and we do not know why. In fact, I have another paper showing that the information design of an app is very important. Some of them trigger one response more than the other. So we do not know. This is something that we will have to check in future research. By the way, there is a lot of evidence showing that mobile phones in general decrease the quality of decision making in all kinds of domains. But in this study, we cannot test because people are using both the PC and the mobile app. So we just do not know. I think that just my gut feeling is that the attention here plays a big role. Part of it is probably due to notification, and part of it is due to boredom. People are driving home or commuting home, and they are done checking Facebook or whatever, and at the end of the day, they also press this icon to see what's happening there. The population is wealthy. That's often is the case in these kinds of apps. We estimated it to be approximately on the 80th percentile of the income distribution, according to the consumer expenditure survey. Of course, we would like to know what would be the impact on lower income individuals. On the one hand, you would think that they would be more concerned about their finances and more responsive. On the other hand, they cannot really drop their spending much more because the income is lower if their MPC is higher. We hope that one day we can test it. We do not advocate it necessarily, this mobile apps as a policy tools, because first of all, we do not know what will happen if you force this on people. But more importantly, the population is adopting it. We are increasing the adoption rate for these apps significantly still. So the public is taking up this app regardless, without the need for policy intervention. And it will be hard to study because most of the users of those apps are only using mobile devices. So we do not have a control. And we definitely should explore more heterogeneous responses across these demographics that you suggested.